Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this Friday afternoon, and we've got a lot to talk about today in this podcast. So in the first segment, we are going to be talking about the game between Notre Dame and the Penn State Nittany Lions. Notre Dame ended up coming out on top, so I'm just going to talk about my thoughts on what went on in the game. And it was a really good game. And then in the second segment, we are going to talk about one weakness that every single playoff team in the NFL has. And obviously, these weaknesses are going to be different depending on the team, so be sure to tune into that if you're interested. Then in the third segment, the All-Pro NFL teams have been announced, both the first and the second team. So we're going to cover that in the third segment. Then in the fourth segment, Jimmy Butler has thrown shade at Pat Riley once again. And this came in a clip that started surfacing on X, formerly known as Twitter. So I'm just going to talk about that and give my thoughts on that little situation and exactly what Jimmy Butler said. And we also have a special fifth segment, as usual, at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned for that if you guys are interested. Before I begin, however, I'd like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, burning question, something you're dying to share. We're all ears, and if you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You click on the $sign below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show. And if Super Chat's not really your thing, then you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead talk about this fantastic college football playoff game, which was Notre Dame going up against Penn State. As I predicted in yesterday's live and in yesterday's segment, if you guys did not tune in, I had a feeling that Notre Dame was going to end up coming out on top in this game. Largely because a large reason for that is because I do have a former teammate that is on that squad, RJ Oben. He's a defensive lineman and fantastic player. Hopefully he gets drafted. But I also said before that I was not really that big of a fan on the quarterback for Penn State. And ironically enough, at the end of the game, he basically sold the game for Penn State at the end of the day. Now, this game did not start out like, how should I say this? Exciting? Because both of those teams were scoreless after, both of those teams were scoreless after the first quarter, and Notre Dame had already thrown an interception. So it was looking a little bit ugly for after the first quarter. But then in the second quarter, things started to ramp up just a little bit. Penn State, they answered first with a field goal, and then they answered with a touchdown after Notre Dame had to punt. But then Notre Dame, just before the quarter ended up taking a field goal to make the score 10-3 going into the half. And then that was when the fireworks started. Notre Dame started with a touchdown in the third quarter, but then all of the teams had to punt. Penn State punted, Notre Dame punted, then Penn State punted again. And then Notre Dame ended up going up 17-10 with a touchdown. And then Penn State answered it right back with a touchdown of their own. Notre Dame threw an interception, which was honestly a pretty bad interception. Then Penn State answered and took the lead with a touchdown to make the score 24-17. And then Notre Dame had a little bit of luck or the power of God on their side, whatever you want to call it, whichever side you believe on. And the cornerback for Penn State, I don't know exactly, I couldn't see exactly who it was, but the cornerback fell. And after the quarterback fell, the wide receiver was wide open for a pass, and then the wide receiver made the safety fall and scored the touchdown to make the score 24-24. And this was with, I believe, like maybe 3 minutes left on the clock. So this gave Penn State enough time to do something with the ball. But Penn State ended up going 3 and out, giving Notre Dame a chance to win the game in the end. However, Notre Dame also had to punt, and this gave Penn State a chance to win the game in the end. And at the very end of the game, the quarterback, well, almost at the very end of the game, the quarterback threw an interception, which ultimately lost the game for Penn State. In the end, Notre Dame ended up walking down the field, and despite being one of the worst teams in like the clutch and in these kinds of scenarios, I saw that kicker was 0 for 4 to take the lead on a game-winning field goal, and he ended up winning the game for Notre Dame in the end. And the final score was 27-24. So, all in all, fantastic game. It's about time we actually got a really good competitive game that came down to the wire, and wasn't like the Arizona State game where it started out being a blowout, then they decided to come back and things like that. It was relatively back and forth, and I was hoping that this game would be back and forth, and I got my wish. Thank you. Now, the game as a whole, the receivers for Penn State, it might seem like Penn State played a much more complete game than Notre Dame, because Notre Dame was held scoreless in the entirety of the first half. But it isn't how you start, it's how you finish, and they finished very, very well. And Penn State, not a single receiver ended up recording a single reception in this game. It was just running backs and tight ends that were catching the ball. And that's really the biggest headline and the biggest storyline in this game. The fact that the receivers for Penn State were completely non-existent. And this was a defensive battle from the beginning of the game. But, I mean, Notre Dame, they ended up throwing 2 interceptions. Excuse me. And it still didn't matter, as Penn State were unable to really capitalize on those interceptions. And the fact that there was not a single receiver for Penn State that ended up recording a single reception was rather concerning. I mean, that like Notre Dame's defense, it seems like they are no joke. Again, the only players who ended up receiving any sort of passes were the running backs and the tight ends. And even then, the tight ends were only held to 1 reception. Other than that, the wide receivers basically did nothing the entire game, which was rather disappointing. Granted, the receivers, they weren't really the highlight for Penn State. It was more so the running backs that they had. Singleton, he ended up recording 3 touchdowns, and Katron Allen ended up recording 82 yards on the ground. So the ground game for Penn State was amazing. I mean, they had 204 rushing yards compared to their passing game, which only had 135 passing yards. So whether you want to blame it on the quarterback, because the quarterback did throw an interception, or you want to blame it on the wide receivers being unable to get open, Notre Dame played some incredible defense, and especially when it mattered most. And the quarterback for Notre Dame, aside from those 2 interceptions, he threw a touchdown and he threw for 223 yards. And despite being injured early in the game, the backup quarterback did a real solid job to try and keep them in the game and not lose the game for Notre Dame in the end. He threw 6 for 7 of his passes, only 44 yards, but again, that's really all you expect from somebody who needed to be a game manager for like a split second for a little bit, until the quarterback was evaluated and ready to go back in the game. And the rushing attack for Notre Dame wasn't that bad either. Jeremiah Love, he was able to hurdle a defender, which was pretty sick to watch. He also recorded 1 rushing touchdown, and Riley Leonard was another running back for the Fighting Irish that ended up recording a touchdown on the night as well. And the player of the game, at least in my opinion, was Jaden Greathouse. He played receiver for Notre Dame, ended up recording 7 receptions for 105 yards, and that 1 touchdown that he got was the game-tying touchdown to tie the game 24-24. And, of course, the kicker, he came through in the clutch. Usually college kickers, they tend to not come through in the clutch. We saw it when Texas went up in overtime. Well, not went up in overtime, but they had a chance to win and not send the game into overtime, and that ultimately ended up failing for them. But this was a great game. Great game all around. I was hoping that the Fighting Irish would end up winning in this game, and they did. So props to them. They're going to match up the team that wins later tonight, which is going to be between Ohio State and Texas. Now, similar to this Notre Dame game, I'm going to go ahead and pick Ohio State to win in this one because another former teammate of mine, Cody Simon, the middle linebacker for Ohio State, is playing, and I want him to succeed. Of course I do. I actually want both of them to succeed, but it's going to be very tough watching them both go head-to-head against each other. Ironically, they both play defense, so technically they will not be going up against each other. They're going to be going up against their team's respective offense, but I'd still hope for a good game going up against going up against Texas. I can't say the Texans because there's already an NFL team called the Texans. So this is also going to be, I feel like, the most important game of Ryan Day's career, because he might not have one anymore in Ohio State if he ends up losing in this game. If they don't win a national championship, I think his job is seriously in jeopardy. And I said his job was going to be in jeopardy the minute he lost to Michigan, because that game is just very, very important to Ohio State and their fans. But that's all that I have for this first segment. Again, let me know in the comments what you guys thought of the game. And now we're going to go into the second segment, where I talk about one weakness that every single NFL playoff team has going into the playoffs, and whether or not that could affect them and what I think is going to happen. So we're going to talk about those weaknesses right after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows with 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. In the second segment, we are going to be talking about every single playoff team and a weakness that they all have going into the postseason. Again, every single weakness is going to be rather different. As we know, not every single team has the same problem, so we're going to go ahead and talk about that. Before I begin, I would like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show. Whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question or something that you're dying to share, we're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. If Super Chat's not your thing, you can always use the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net, to send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show, makes it more interactive between myself and you guys. And let's go ahead and get into the second segment. But before I do, I'd like to acknowledge Manzano in the chat saying, do you think Penn State fans are being emotional after this loss? Calling for James Franklin to be fired, even though his track record against top 25 and Big Ten games is bad. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of fans that are emotional. Then there's and when you are emotional, you immediately look for somebody to blame, especially when you win in a game like this. And calling for James Franklin to be fired, I genuinely don't think it was his fault that Penn State ended up losing this game. Their players just did not perform in when they needed to perform. And I understand that he doesn't have a good track record against those top teams. But again, I feel like this is more of like, a scapegoat thing. But maybe Penn State decides to fire him at the end of the day. But this was a player collapse more so than it was a coaching collapse. It's not like Penn State was up by a lot when they exited and went into the first half. The game was very close, and it was really just down to which team can make the big plays at the right moment. And Penn State's cornerbacks falling and slipping, that was very, very unlucky for them. And, the interception at the end of the game from their quarterback was also a really big mistake. And if you're going to blame anyone, you should probably blame the quarterback or the wide receivers. The wide receivers didn't do a single thing throughout the entirety of this game. And it's really difficult to win like that when your wide receivers are essentially a non-factor. Now, he most likely was outcoached, at least on the defensive side of the ball, because, the defense was able to read those receivers and limit them to absolutely 0 receptions. But again, not entirely sure. And he says, he responded, "I disagree with you just a little bit. Explain his horrible clock management with waiting to waste his time out until there was 30 seconds left in the game against Notre Dame." Obviously, I can't really explain that. I can't explain that. I don't know exactly what goes on through his head when he's doing that. But I will say that maybe he had a little bit of hope that his defense would hold out. Again, it's a mental error, and that sort of stuff happens. But the game, in my opinion, at least for me, I knew that the game was going to be over right when Notre Dame ended up getting the ball, because they had some really solid field position from where they got the ball. And it wasn't like they had to travel down the entire length of the field to go ahead and score a game-winning field goal at the end of the day. They already had great field position. They lost that game once the quarterback threw an interception and gave up the ball. They had a chance and they blew it. I think it's just that simple. But going back into the segment that I wanted to get into, we're going to talk about each and every playoff team's weakness that they have going into the wild card and going into their respective playoff games. So for the first team, we're going to talk about the Denver Broncos, and I think the biggest problem for them is their lack of a run game. Now, their quarterback, Bo Nix, has been phenomenal, but while they are very great in the air, they aren't really all that good on the ground. They're like in the middle of the pack and like the middle of the rest of the league at 112 yards per game on the ground. And Denver's carries, however, they're ranked outside of the top 20. Denver's leading rusher, Javonte Williams, he only averaged 3.7 yards per carry, and that's not really good. You sort of need a solid run game, because teams already know that you're going to be passing and they're going to come up with schemes to sort of limit your passing. If you don't have a solid run game to rely on, then it's going to be very difficult to win in these football games. And they don't have enough, I don't think they have the firepower to be able to match up against teams like the Bills or the Ravens if they end up making it far enough to go up against those teams. But that's one issue that they have going into this game. Another team that has a jarring issue, at least in my opinion, the Green Bay Packers. Actually, we're going over all these teams, but the Green Bay Packers, they have an inconsistent passing game. I've joked about this, and the media has joked about this as well, that Jordan Love is a Toyotathon merchant. For some reason, every single time that Toyotathon has started, Jordan Love just balls out of his mind. And then once it ends, or before it even starts, he plays very, very questionably and is just seems to be rather mediocre in this season. Now, they've won 11 games in a very, very difficult conference, and however, the Packers, they ended up losing twice to the Vikings and the Detroit Lions, and they also fell to the Eagles early in week 1. Now, the Packers, they can't really get over the hump against conferences. It might be their passing game. I think that's sort of the big reason why they can't really get over the hump in their conference, because Jordan Love has been rather inconsistent. Meanwhile, Sam Darnold and Jared Goff tends to be very consistent in their passing game. And that's sort of a really big difference between those three teams. And Jordan Love is ranked 16th amongst the quarterbacks in passing yards per game. He's 4 years into the NFL, and he's already hit 200 passing yards and 2 touchdowns just once in the past month. Like, that is not a very good recipe for success if you are the Green Bay Packers. And not only that, Christian Watson is also done for the year with a torn ACL, which is it's not an ideal situation to go into a playoff game without one of your best receivers at the helm. It's not a really good recipe for success there. Now, the next team that we're going to talk about is the Steelers, and a big problem that I feel like they have is their entire offense. Before I continue, though, Manzano wants to ask the question, did you agree with the pass interference call that went in favor of Tyler Warren on the defensive back for Notre Dame, where the guy barely touched them? Yeah, I don't agree with that call whatsoever. But obviously, these refs, they mess up from time to time. And either way, at the end of the day, it worked out. It worked out. But again, I don't agree. I don't necessarily agree with that call. But back on the Steelers and their issues, their entire offense is stinky. And this has been a trend that goes on for the Steelers every single time. Every single year that the Steelers have had a positive record, they always have a lackluster offense, but they somehow have a positive record because their defense is able to keep them in games. They play some of the ugliest football in the modern NFL right now, and they still are able to win games, and they still are able to have some sort of success in the regular season at least. And I think their entire offense is going to hold them back tremendously in the postseason. It usually always does. So the next team that we are going to talk about is the Dallas Cowboys, and their biggest issue is that they're not in the playoffs and they have Dak Prescott at quarterback. You know very well that I'm going to take a shot at Dallas whenever I can. So, But aside from that, we're going to talk about the other NFC rival that I just do not like, but I do like their quarterback, however. The Washington Commanders. Now, the Commanders, they've been fantastic on offense, both in the air and on the ground. Hold on just one second. Anthony Manzano says Carson Beck, the quarterback for Georgia. Wait, what? He transferred to Miami? Wait a minute. Hold on. I need to figure that out because I did not see that coming. I knew he was going to try and transfer, but I didn't think he was going to go to Miami. Hold on just 1 second. I want to see how that goes. Let me see. Hold on. I did not, I don't see any sort of confirmation on that, so I'm going to have to get back to you on that. But that was Jesus, don't scare me like that. Like, why would you do that? Again, no confirmation on that. Maybe you're right. Maybe you already have, I don't know, maybe you're some sort of insider. I don't know what you are, but I have not seen any sort of confirmation on that from any of the major news sites. So I'm just going to hold off on that and continue going into this list of the issues for each and every playoff team. But again, the biggest issue for Washington, in my opinion, is their run defense. Now, let me just try and put up some stats. Let me see real quick. I'm trying to find the stats, but there was also a quote that Scott Smith wrote from the Bucs and their website. Irving's instinctive moves make him a pain to bring down despite his size, as he forced a missed tackle on 35% of his runs, the highest mark for any player with at least 150 carries this season. Just 2 weeks ago, during a 190-yard performance in a win over Carolina, Irving gained 111 yards after contact. He is also a natural pass catcher and a weapon to go the distance on outlet and swing passes. Now, the Commanders against the run, they have been allowing 137 yards per game. No team in the postseason has given up more than that. And Manzano says, I'm a Hurricanes fan and I follow 24/7 in ESPN, and a lot of college football reporters are reporting this. Again, I haven't gotten that report yet, so I have no idea how accurate that is. So I can't really talk about that yet until I actually get a notification. So again, you might be right, and I might just be completely wrong for saying that for not talking about it, but again, not entirely sure about that, so I can't really talk about that in confidence, so I apologize for that. But next team that we're going to talk about is the Chargers, and the biggest problem with the Chargers, at least in my opinion, is their run game. Now, Dobbins has set a career high in rushing yards this season with 905 and averaged 4.6 yards per carry. But for the season, the Chargers have averaged only 110 yards per game and ranked in the bottom half of the league. So they're almost entirely reliant on Justin Herbert's right arm, which is something that's been, a little bit of a trend in the Chargers' history when they do have Justin Herbert. And, excuse me. But the reality of this, Dobbins was impressive after contact and 5th in the league with 24 broken tackles, but he had to work for absolutely every single yard. And again, like I said before, not having a competent enough run game is going to be very difficult for teams to sort of win with that, because if the other team knows that you're going to be heavily reliant on the pass, then teams are going to find a way to defend it. And Anthony Manzano says his biggest worry about the Chargers going into the playoffs is their inconsistent and lack of faith in the run game. Well, you can't really have that much faith with the numbers that I just gave. Now, going into the next team, which is... Oh, wait, no, this is not the next team. Hold on just one second. I'm trying to find the next team real quick. Hold on. Okay, so for some reason, when I pulled up the Vikings, a picture of the Vikings was not showing, which was very, very weird. But regardless, the Vikings are going to be the next team. And Minnesota has... their problem is Sam Darnold. And I'm not that keen on Sam Darnold being the starting quarterback of a playoff team. He's been a little bit inconsistent. Again, this team is just so good offensively that it really hasn't mattered all that much. But I'm scared that Sam Darnold is going to mess up eventually, because he's Sam Darnold and that's what he does. Eventually, his mess up is going to come. So that's my thought process on that. Again, I could just be completely wrong, but I genuinely don't think I am, because he's Sam Darnold. What more needs to be said about Sam Darnold other than the fact that he's Sam Darnold? I don't care that he had a very impressive year. The playoffs are a completely different environment, especially now, because it should be noted that the Vikings game against the Rams has been changed and has been moved to play over in Atlanta because of all the fires that have been going on in Los Angeles. So just for player safety, the game has been moved over to Atlanta. The next team is the Houston Texans. Their biggest problem, aside from C.J. Stroud, is the lack of an offensive line. Now, the offensive line has had several injuries. Now, this team has also had several injuries at wide receiver, and I feel like the offensive line, according to Ben Rolfe, C.J. Stroud's propensity to hold the ball for a long time hasn't really helped the Texans and this number. But 11.3% of sack rate in a face of a blitz. That's 28th, and it's not really down to C.J. Stroud being unable to get rid of the ball quick. But Houston has also allowed 35.6%. They have a 35... Jesus. They have a 35.6% pressure rate, which is 28th against 4 or fewer pass rushers. They rank 31st in RBYBC/rush and 30th in run block win rate. So, again, not a very ideal situation to go into in this game. Now, the next team that we are going to talk about, and we're going to have to go through this a little bit quickly, is the Rams. And they have a very inconsistent defense. The Rams won the NFC West this year, but Sean McVay has told reporters that the likes of edge rushers Jared Verse and safety Cameron Kinchins haven't played like this was their first season in the pros. And they are the embodiment of this team. So that's a pretty good sign, yes. But as a whole, Los Angeles is 26th in yards allowed and a middling 17th in scoring defense. And again, defense is something that you really need in these postseasons. Now, the next team that we're going to talk about is the Baltimore Ravens. And the biggest problem for the Ravens is a really bad secondary, in my opinion. And while Lamar Jackson is fantastic and Derrick Henry has been fantastic, the Ravens are 31st in the league against the pass. This is the worst ranking in any team in the postseason. And going up against a solid team that could actually score the football a lot, like Josh Allen or maybe even Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, that's going to be a very difficult task for this Ravens team. Now, the next team on this list is going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And their biggest problem is also a bad passing defense. Now, the Bucs were 29th in the NFL against the pass this year, allowing 243 yards per game. And Tampa's 96.6 passer rating against is the highest of any team in the postseason. Now, obviously, this is not ideal, especially when you're going up against a quarterback like Jaden Daniels, who is really, really good at throwing the ball. Now, the next team on this list is going to be, if I can actually click on them properly. No, I cannot. There we go. The Bills. Now, you guys can't really see my screen, but it's like the screens for the presentation, they're blank on my screen, so I can't really see anything for some reason. But the biggest problem for the Bills is the lack of star wide receivers. Obviously, that wasn't a problem when they had Stephon Diggs, but now that they don't really have him, while it hasn't affected Josh Allen that much, the lack of star wide receivers with the consistent ability to get open is not ideal going into this game. The Bills rank 4th in net pass yards per attempt, yet they are a bottom 10 offense in average separation score, according to Fantasy Points. Matt Collins has a wide receiver room's highest open score at 63, which is 32nd, while each of some of the other analysts have them at either 72nd. Like Kyle Shakir is 51, 72nd, Keon Coleman 46, 83rd, and Amari Cooper 43, 88th. This is like overall Buffalo has the sixth worst average open score among all qualified wide receivers and tight ends. So they seem to have an inability or a difficulty trying to get open. Now, the next team is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles, and their biggest problem is Jalen Hurts, who I think has been rather inconsistent throughout a majority of the year. And I'm not really going to say much just because we are running really low on time. But again, Jalen Hurts, he started as a turnover machine, and then all of a sudden he started playing really good football. So it's like, what kind of Jalen Hurts are you going to get in this playoff matchup? And then the Chiefs, their biggest issue, at least for the regular season, has been their dink and dunk offense. They've been throwing a lot of checkdowns, way more than usual, and Patrick Mahomes has also thrown a couple interceptions this year. And dinking and dunking, while it's worked for players like Tom Brady for 20 plus years, I'm not sure if it's going to work against the Chiefs. Now, or I'm not sure it's going to work in favor of the Chiefs, excuse me. And then finally, the Detroit Lions. And again, their big problem is having a poor pass defense. And they have a season-high 75.6% pass defense success rate, which is a remarkable feat given that the Lions' health and quality of their opponent. This unit is still a concern with all of the injuries that they have. So Terrion Arnold is going to be out. Linebacker Alex Anzalone, excuse me if I messed up that last name, he's also going to be out in this game. And he he was a difference maker in his return to the lineup, and it's still possible for the likes of like Carlton Davis and Aiden Hutchinson to return with a deep playoff run. But again, it's the fact that these guys are injured, and also the Lions have been really good against the run all season, 5th in the league at just 98.4 yards per game. So it's really just the passing that's been a little bit of a problem for this team. So that's all that I have in this second segment, a much longer segment than the rest of the other ones. So we're going to go ahead and go into the short break and then talk about the all-pro teams that have been announced in the NFL. It's going to be a quicker segment than usual because I spent a lot of time on this. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, it's going to be a much quicker third segment than most of the other times that I've done this, but we're going to go ahead and talk about the NFL's all-pro team. They were recently just announced like a few minutes ago, so we're going to go ahead and talk about that. So for the first team offense, we have Lamar Jackson at quarterback, very well deserved. Running back is Saquon Barkley because of course. Fullback is Patrick Ricard, again rather deserved in my opinion. Tight end is Brock Powers, another person that I feel like definitely deserves this all-pro selection. He's been fantastic in this year, leading rookies in history for total receptions. Just great. Next is Jamar Chase, and then underneath Jamar Chase is Justin Jefferson, and then underneath him is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, personally, I would have much rather seen the amazing wide receiver Malik Neighbors as the in the all-pro team, in the all-pro first team. I don't see why he wouldn't be in the all-pro first team. Now, he's missed a couple of games, and he was slightly behind Brock Powers in receptions, and he also had to play with like 4 different quarterbacks, and he was still able to get 1,000 receiving yards, which I think is nothing short of impressive. And the fact that he's not on the first team All-Pro is very, very disrespectful, in my opinion. Now, at left tackle, Tristan Wirfs. At left guard, Joe Thuney. At center, Creed Humphrey. Right guard, Quinn I don't know how to pronounce that name. I always have difficulty with that name. Ners, forgive me if I messed it up. Penny Sewell is also the right tackle for the team. Now, on defense, there's the edge, Myles Garrett, and also Trey Hendrickson. At defensive tackle, Cameron Hayward. At second defensive tackle, Chris Jones. Linebacker is Zach Bond, Fred Warner, Raquan Smith. Cornerbacks are Patrick Surtain II, Derek Stingley, excuse me. I started thinking of Singletary Jr. And the slot cornerback is Marlon Humphrey. Safeties are Kirby Joseph and Xavier McKinney. Of course, Xavier McKinney, that is 2 former Giants on all-pro first teams. Of course, because we get nothing in life. We get nothing special. And then for first team all special teams, the kicker is Chris Boswell, punter is Jack Fox, kick returner is Cavante Turpin, punt returner is Marvin Mims Jr., and strong tackle is Brendan Schooler, and Andrew DePola is the LS. Now, going into the second team all offense, we have Josh Allen at quarterback. So now I'm thinking that maybe Lamar Jackson is definitely going to be the MVP because he made the all-pro first team. Meanwhile, Josh Allen made the all-pro second team. So it would be very, very odd if Josh Allen won the MVP despite being named all-pro second team. Now, running back is Derrick Henry. Very well deserved. Again, not as good as Saquon Barkley was this year, but still very well deserved. Fullback is Kyle Jazaik. Forgive me if I messed up that last name. It's literally like one of the most difficult last names in the NFL. Tight end, George Kittle. Wide receiver, Terry McLaurin. Another wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb. Like, CeeDee Lamb really got picked over Malik Neighbors. Really? CeeDee? Then A.J. Brown is another one. Again, I think A.J. Brown is rather solid. Left tackle, Jordan Mailata. Quentin Nelson is the left guard. Frank Ragnow is the center. Chris Lindstrom is the right guard. And Lane Johnson is the right tackle. Now, the second team all defense, we have edge rusher TJ Watt because, of course, he's going to make an all defensive team. We also have edge Nick Bonito and another edge Andrew Van Ginkel. Defensive tackle is Zach Allen and Jalen Carter. Linebackers are Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner, and Zaire Franklin. Trent McDuffie is the cornerback. Christian Gonzalez is also another cornerback. And the slot cornerback is Derwin James. The safety is Kyle Hamilton and Budda Baker. And for second team, you have Brandon Aubrey, Logan Cook, Austin Eckler as the kick returner, Khalif Raymond, and JT Gray and Ross Matiskic. Forgive me if I messed any of those names up. But that is your all-pro first team and your all-pro second team. Again, the fact that there is no Malik Neighbors is incredibly criminal in my opinion. Now, there's obviously going to be a little bit of bias going into that, but you're telling me that Malik Neighbors does not deserve to be first team after the situation that he was in going into this year. I mean, the fact that you're able to get 1,000 receiving yards with Daniel Jones as your quarterback should be a lifetime achievement for any wide receiver. It does not matter. Now, obviously, maybe having a lot of missed games is a reason why, but for he could have at least made second team at the very least. Now he has more receptions. He has more receptions than CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb has 101 receptions compared to Malik Neighbors with 109 receptions. And let's see here, he also has more receiving yards than CeeDee. CeeDee Lamb has 1,194 receiving yards compared to Malik Neighbors' 1,204 receiving yards. And let's see, going further into this list, where are the touchdowns? Because the touchdowns are obviously going to be the most important stat that people look at. And his touchdowns, comparing the two, Neighbors has 7 touchdowns on the year compared to CeeDee Lamb, who had 6 touchdowns on the year. So overall, Malik Neighbors has better stats in absolutely every single category than CeeDee Lamb. And on top of that, he's played in 2 less games. Well, he started in 2 less games, and he did not play the entirety of the season. He did miss some time due to injuries, but how is he not an all-pro wide receiver? And how is CeeDee Lamb an all-pro wide receiver? Like, this is just, I understand CeeDee Lamb's numbers are very impressive, but Malik's numbers are even more impressive. Like, this is ridiculous bias, in my opinion. And, of course, they had to put somebody on the Cowboys on an all-NFL team because they had to. Like, that is absolutely disgusting, in my opinion. CeeDee Lamb. Like, really? But that's really all that I have going into this. And again, it was a much shorter segment because we are extremely low on time, and I have to be wary of that. So we're going to go quickly into the fourth segment where I talk about Jimmy Butler and his little situation. And well, it looks like Manzano's right. Carson Beck just committed to Miami, so that's definitely something that I'm going to have to talk about for next week. But aside from that, we're going to go into the fourth segment where I talk about Jimmy Butler and his issue with Miami and their owner Pat Riley. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to go ahead and talk about Jimmy Butler and his little shade that he threw at Pat Riley. And of course, this came in a video clip that has been trending on X, formerly known as Twitter. Where have I seen that before? And that's a rhetorical question because we've seen this in the when Jimmy Butler was social media was the whole reason why Jimmy Butler and Miami have sort of fallen out of relations, because Pat Riley, he was talking about how, Jimmy Butler was talking about how if he was still on the Miami Heat roster instead of being injured, he would have beaten the Boston Celtics and he would have beaten the Knicks. And Pat Riley is there looking at that clip saying, if you're not playing, stop talking. And that's soured relationships ever since, and now it's even more soured because Miami seems to be unwilling to pay Jimmy Butler and his contract. Now, obviously, Jimmy has been a little bit bitter, and we know when Jimmy gets mad and when he gets bitter, he gets very petty and he gets very emotional and he turns into an incredible diva. This happens every single time. This happened on the Timberwolves, and it's happening now in Miami. Now, he has posted several videos on his Instagram stories that showed him working at a coffee shop. And in one of those videos, Butler said, quote, "See, I gave you a compliment. That's what bosses do. They build you up. They don't break you down." Like, give me a break. Like, are you serious? You're going to be that petty? Like, are you seriously that hurt with what Pat Riley had to say, saying that you do not, if you're going to, if you're going to talk about another team, then you should be playing? Because, like, that seems very childish of Jimmy. And yes, I did find anything, Manzano's in the chat. Yes, I did find something confirming that Carson Beck is transferring to Miami. ESPN, they sent out a notification about that. So that's very interesting. I still have no idea exactly what to think about that. I'm not a big fan of Carson Beck. Like, I do not like Carson Beck. I don't think he's as competent of a quarterback as people want to make him out to be. And one of the things that also kind of soured me was that he was laughing on the sideline when he only led his offense to 3 points. And again, that might be a little bit unfair to just take that one sample size. But again, I have not been that high on Carson Beck at all in college football. I just don't really like him. Like, Georgia and that team, it's an incredibly competent team. The fact that Georgia was is eliminated from the college football playoffs is unacceptable, really, with that sort of team. And the fact that they were even able to even make the playoffs is just like, really? Like, you're gonna get, really? Like, how? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of Carson Beck. Now for Manzano, he says it's 50-50. I blame Jimmy for being immature and acting like a baby, but I believe Pat for not telling this to Jimmy in private. Man, Jimmy went on socials to tell everybody. he went on socials to tell the whole world, and now it's a bad thing when Pat Riley tells the whole world that Jimmy should just stop talking and play basketball. Like, really? And it's not like, now, on the quote itself, they build you up, they don't break you down. Telling you to stop talking because you're injured is not breaking you down. Like, I think that's incredibly soft. He should have taken the criticism like a normal human being and have just worked around it. I don't understand that. And yes, I know you are a Heat fan. Miami fan in general. The Hurricanes, the Miami Heat. Makes total sense. But let me know in the comments what you think. Like, do you think you would want to trade Jimmy Butler? And would you accept a trade that would allow you guys to get Bradley Beal? Because that seems to be the most likely scenario that's going on. Now, the Heat announced last week that they were suspending Jimmy Butler for 7 games for multiple instances of conduct detrimental to the team. Like, he is an unbelievable diva. And what's crazy about it is that there's this persona around the league that Jimmy Butler is one of the most clutch players in the league and in the postseason. That is a complete myth. That is a lie. That is fabricated, all because of one playoff run in the bubble. Yes, he played well in the first round 2 years ago, but aside from that, that was the only time he actually deserved the playoff Jimmy Butler name, because he fell off when he played against the Knicks, he fell off when he played against the Celtics, and he extremely fell off when he played against the Denver Nuggets. Now, Manzano said, he's not worth as much as I thought. He was going to be, because no team wants to give up draft picks. If we had traded him before, hold on, I'm trying to see. Traded him before, and this situation happened, I think we would have, I think we would have gotten more. And now you're starting to agree with other fan bases that Jimmy is I'm not going to say that word, but he's a detriment to the locker room because he was accused of being a detriment in Chicago, Philly, and Minnesota. He's just very, very full of himself. Like, I knew he was full of himself, but I didn't think it was this bad. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with trolling the other team on the internet, in my opinion, but going to someone and say, record this, and say that if I was playing, the Celtics would have been swept, or if I was playing, the Knicks would have been done for, this, that, and the other. That's just incredibly childish. And, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. We all saw how much of a detriment in the locker room he was in Minnesota. But obviously tension between Jimmy Butler and Riley seemingly date back to May when that incident occurred. And he's 35 years old, and he's in the midst of his 14th season, and this is going to be his 6th season with the Miami Heat after previous stints as a member of Chicago, Minnesota, and Philly. And 2 of his 6 career All-Star appearances have come since he arrived in Miami, and he has also led the Heat to the NBA Finals twice. Again, that does not mean you have the right to talk like the way that he does. But again, a little bit of a shorter segment because we are extremely low on time. I spent a lot of time talking about the issues for each and every playoff team. I spent a lot of time with that. So I apologize for making these segments rather short. But again, Jimmy Butler, and what makes this even worse is that he's not even having as good of a season to even talk the way that he talks. He's averaging 17 points per game. While he is an efficient shooter, shooting 55% from the field and 37% from 3, again, his impact and his production in the points category is just not enough. If you're not taking that many shots, of course you're going to average all that, a much higher field goal percentage. And I just don't see Jimmy Butler like that. I don't see Jimmy Butler like the player that he was when he went up against the Lakers. And he's just a myth in the postseason. And aside from that, that's all that I really have in that's all that I have in this segment. So now we're going to go into the NBA recap of the 5th segment because a lot of stuff happened last night. And we're mainly going to focus, well, not really going to focus on just one team, but I really want to get into talking about the Cavs and specifically Darius Garland. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And we are going to do a quick recap of all of the games in the NBA that went down. It should be noted that the Lakers game was postponed due to all the fires that are going on near the area. So hopefully any of you guys in the Los Angeles area are safe and are not caught up in the flames of disaster, or whatever you want to call it. Now, let's go ahead, and I said I wanted to talk about the Cavs, so let's go right ahead and get into this. So they ended up beating the Raptors 132-126, but that wasn't the impressive thing that I wanted to talk about. I mainly wanted to talk about Darius Garland, who ended the game with 40 points, 9 assists, 2 steals, and 2 rebounds. Now, alongside Donovan Mitchell, LeBron James, and Kyrie Irving, he is one of those 4 players to have 5 or more 40-point games for the Cavs. Like I said, the 3 players aside from him are Donovan Mitchell, because of course, LeBron, because obviously, and Kyrie Irving. So the fact that he's in such an elite company only tells me that this Cavs team might actually be legit. Like, they're rising up as we speak in like the projections to win the NBA championship. Obviously, like, the favorites are the Celtics and the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Knicks are there, but they're a little bit lower in the odds than the Cleveland Cavaliers. But the Cavs have been balling out. They have the best record in the NBA right now. They're 33-4. Absolutely ridiculous stuff that they're doing. And I don't think I've ever seen, I know I've never seen a Cavs team this dominant without LeBron James. No one has ever seen this before. Nobody. Now, on the Raptors side, also it should be noted that this win was without Donovan Mitchell, but again, it's Toronto and they're tanking for Cooper Flag. Now, Scotty Barnes had 24, 10, and 8, and RJ Barrett had 25 and 5. And off the bench, Chris Boucher had 23 and 12. So it was really down to Darius Garland hitting the most important shots late in the game to finally put the game out of reach. Now, the next game on this list, the Dallas Mavericks, they ended up playing the Portland Trailblazers. Excuse me. Still no Kyrie Irving, still no Luka Doncic, but still they were able to get the win against a very bad team, the Trailblazers. They ended up winning 117-111. PJ Washington had 23 and 14, and Derek Lively II had 21 and 16. And off the bench, Jaden Hardy had 25 points. Now, on the Trailblazers side, Fernie Simmons had 22 points, and Shaedon Sharpe had 22 points as well. The Warriors, they ended up beating the Pistons only by 3 points. They ended up winning 107-104. And Steph Curry played really bad, only 17 points in this one, and shot 5 for 21 from the field, 2 for 14 from 3. The fact that they were able to win this game is actually a little bit embarrassing if you are the Pistons, because holding Steph Curry to shooting that badly should ultimately guarantee you a win with this squad. And Cade Cunningham had, again, 32 points and still had to lose. He also recorded 3 steals, 8 assists, and 6 rebounds. And Malik Beasley dropped 21 points in this one, but aside from him and Cade Cunningham, there was really no dominant scorers for the Detroit Pistons in this one. Buddy Hield ended up being the leading scorer for the Golden State Warriors with 19 points and 5 for 11 from 3, and that was really all that she wrote. Now, the Timberwolves, they ended up beating the Orlando Magic. They ended up winning 104-89. It should be noted that after this game, Paolo Banchero is officially cleared and is returning to play. So now I expect the Magic to start winning way more games than they have been. Still need to wait on Franz Wagner, but again, Paolo Banchero is the most important piece to their team. Now, that being said, nobody on Orlando ended up scoring more than 20 points. The highest scorer in this game was center Goga Bitadze, who ended up recording 15 points on 7 for 12 shooting. And for the Timberwolves matchup, Anthony Edwards had 21 points, 7 assists, and Julius Randle had 23 points and 10 rebounds. Next game on this list is Phoenix going up against Atlanta. They ended up winning 123-115. Devin Booker had 20 points, 12 assists. Kevin Durant had 23 points and 7 assists. Bradley Beal off the bench, again the leading scorer, had 25 points, 11 for 16, 2 for 5 from 3. I guess he really, really wants to get traded out now. Or either that, or he's trying to convince the Suns that he wants to stay. Grayson Allen has ended the game 7 for 8 from the field and 23 points. And it really seems like Bradley Beal is playing much better off of the bench than he did in the starting lineup. Trae Young had 21 points and 7 assists. Bogdan Bogdanovic had 17 points, 7 for 11 from the field. And, of course, Zachary Rasacher did absolutely nothing, dropping only 5 points and 2 for 4 from the field. Again, one of the most underwhelming first overall picks in recent memory. Now, the next game, Rockets, they ended up beating the Grizzlies in a very close one, 119-115. And Fred VanVleet had 22. Jalen Green is going back on his monster run with 27 points. Sengun had 32 and 14 in this one. And on Memphis' side, John Morant had 27. Jaren Jackson Jr. had 21, 8, and 4. Again, very good game coming in from both of those teams. Now, the Miami Heat, they ended up beating the Utah Jazz. Again, it's the Jazz, so not really all that impressive. No Jimmy Butler because, of course, he's busy in his coffee shop. The Heat won 97-92. Tyler Hero had 23 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists. And Jamie Jaquez Jr. had 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. And Bam Adebayo had only 15 points and 7 rebounds, but it was enough to go up against this Jazz team. Lauri Markkanen wasting his time on the Jazz, in my opinion. 23 points, and Colin Sexton also ended with 23 points. And that was basically all she wrote for these games. And that's all that I have in this final segment. So thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, a burning question, something you're dying to share. We're all ears, and if you want your comment or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat or using the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. Either or really helps the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and hope you guys enjoy watching the NFL playoff games over this weekend, as well as the college football playoffs happening later tonight. And as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.